We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Hey everyone! Happy 1 year to the Paring Down podcast. Thanks for being here today. Like I just said, Paring Down turns 1 year old this week, which is a little nuts. I don't know. It's all just been such a natural progression of things, of me sharing about decluttering and organization in my life. And it really just blows my mind to see what has become of all of that. And, you know, my goal for when I first started the podcast a year ago was that I would get 1,000 listens a week in the first year. And that felt extremely lofty. And it was really lofty. You know, the podcast space is pretty saturated. There's a lot of podcasts you could be listening to. And so it means the world that you're listening to mine. And that was my big goal. And guys, we are 1 year in. The podcast gets around 5,000 listens a week. That's crazy. 5,000 every week. And you want to hear an even crazier stat? My total listens in this first year are 94,000. What is happening? That's wild, especially considering that when I started this, I didn't even have an Instagram. I started the Instagram a couple weeks before the first episode came out. So, started from ground zero. As you guys know, that means that I have now signed with a podcast network. And that's a dream come true, that this has become an actual career of mine. And on that note, I have mentioned this before, but just a reminder that if you hear advertisements on the podcast, I do try and make sure that the ones that are host read, so when I'm reading them, first of all, they're all firsthand. So they're all products that I have been able to try. And I do try and make sure that those host read, like not radio-ish ones, but the ones that you hear me talking about on the podcast with my own voice are hopefully less cluttery and more on brand. But I just want you to know that it means the world that you're willing to listen to some ads, because it really does allow me to be able to do this for a more sustained career. And if you're enjoying what I'm sharing, I hope that that is good news to you, that you want me to keep coming back every week. So, gosh, it's just everything has been beyond my wildest dreams for this first year. Anywho, all of that is not at all to toot my horn. It's just to say thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for making my dream come true, that I get to do something I love every day and hopefully helps your life. And that makes me so happy to know that I'm helping people out there. Oh, and I had 2 weeks ago said my goal was to get 100 reviews on Apple before the 1 year mark. And you guys came through. I have 108 reviews on Apple. What's up? And so that was so helpful. Because that too, that helps it grow. It helps with the podcast algorithm or whatever that is to help kind of spread it on the back end of things. So thank you so much if you've left a review, especially if you've written something. But even if you just hit those 5 stars, just tap the 5 stars and that's all you do. It is so incredibly helpful. So thank you so much. And reading the words of those of you who have written reviews could make me cry. It has made me tear up before because it just blows my mind. And so thank you for taking the time to do that. I recognize that that's a generous thing for you to do, and that it takes a couple minutes out of your day to sit down and write something nice about a podcast, so that it helps a stranger and helps other people find the podcast. You're helping other strangers listen to something that hopefully will be helpful to them. So it's just a super generous thing. And I am very grateful for it. Now, today's episode is a little bit different. If you know my pattern of things, it's usually guest and then solo episode, guest, solo episode every other week like that. But this week should be a solo episode week. However, the hurricanes in Florida happened just a few weeks ago. And someone from my personal account, she and I have never met in person, but we've connected online. And her area was heavily affected by both Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. And as we were chatting in DMs, she was sending me a couple voice notes because she had evacuated to kind of my area of Florida. And so she was just asking, where can I take the kids to be entertained while I'm up here and hoping my house survives? As she was sharing some of those voice notes with me, I realized that what she had to say was so important for everyone to hear. And it relates so deeply back to our stuff in terms of the possibility of losing everything during a hurricane and what that feels like, and the perspective that it gave her. And in addition to that, she's an important voice to hear. A lot of times I have guests on the podcast who are experts in the space, and they're amazing. But what concerns me is that we start to hear similar voices. And what I mean by that is people who have somewhat similar backgrounds, somewhat similar viewpoints. And Lala, who you're going to hear today, she comes from a very different background from mine, and she's not a decluttering expert, that's not what she does for a living. And her voice about privilege and about what our stuff can represent, but how we can still manage to have a healthy relationship with stuff is beyond anything I'd be able to share from my perspective. And I do feel so grateful, like I mentioned, for all of you tuning in every week. And I feel a sense of responsibility with this platform to make sure that I am elevating voices that aren't just similar to mine or people that I meet that have these big influences on Instagram and on social media. And while there is a place for that, I think that there's so much value in people who do this professionally. I do want to make sure that I'm connecting people who, quote, really get it with the rest of you, with my listeners, so that you can feel heard and so you can feel challenged in a different way that I'm not able to offer you. So anyway, this is a bit of a longer intro than usual, but I did want to say thank you and happy birthday to Paring Down, and also give you a little bit of insight into what this episode today is going to be like with Lala Hairston as she shares her perspective on what it was like to consider the possibility of losing everything during these devastating hurricanes, as well as her background and how she grew up in a way that has affected the way that she sees stuff. Oh, I did want to mention really fast that speaking of hurricane stuff, Lala's Wi-Fi wasn't working perfectly because again, she just got her power back. So there's a little bit of a sound delay. And I think I was able to edit it in a way that is not too noticeable. But if you ever notice maybe one of us starting a thought and it's like overlapping with someone else's, or there's a weird pause or whatever, that's the delay at work. So just wanted to give you a heads up about that. Alrighty, let's give a warm welcome, even though there's no applause on podcasts, but still let's give a warm welcome to Lala Hairston. Lala, I am so grateful to have you on today. This is such a treat since, gosh, how long have we been Instagram friends?
Oh my God, I think you just had your second child in Alaska. That's when I started following
Whoa,
you. Yeah,
that's crazy. She turns 5 this December,
yeah.
so half a
That's when I
decade.
think I believe that's when I started following you, and then because I went through all of that, and then you talking about your book, writing your book. I got a copy of your book, all of that.
You've always just been such a light. You're probably one of the first people where they say, oh, I became friends with someone online. And I was always like, well, that's
How?
weird and creepy. And then it's like, actually, no, it's not, because I feel like I know you. And so it's really fun to actually get to talk to you face to face. We've done
Yeah,
voice notes, so I knew what your voice sounded like, but
yeah.
we haven't been able to have a real conversation. So why don't you tell the people a bit about yourself, just kind of like what your family life looks like, and then maybe just a high overview of what the past month has looked like for you.
Okay. So my name is Lala Hairston. I am a mom. I like to say that I'm a typical millennial mom. Three boys. They are 5, 3, and 2. My husband's active duty military. He's in the Coast Guard. And I own a cleaning business with my mom here in Tampa Bay, Florida.
Love that so much. So obviously we relate on the coasty level.
Yeah.
We also relate because we're losing our minds with 3 children that are all very young. And then I love that you have a cleaning business because that speaks to my soul. Actually, I need you to come clean my house because I'm good at decluttering. But as I've told the people before, cleaning is not my thing. I feel bad. People come to my podcast or my Instagram page and I feel like sometimes they expect me to be able to offer cleaning tips. And I'm like, no, ma'am,
No.
don't look too closely at our baseboards.
I'm the opposite. I'm good at the cleaning. The decluttering stresses me out, and I'm like, ugh, it takes me longer. So I think most people are like that. They're either the cleaner or the declutter. I've rarely met people who are both.
That's such a good point. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
look, too bad we can't all just like create the perfect person by combining ourselves. I joke that actually with my husband all the time about our kids. I'm like, if you took Anderson's like brilliance and you paired it with Joe's laid backness and then you sprinkled in like Warren's magic, we'd have like the perfect kid. And then, like, by the way, I do think my kids are all perfect, just so no haters
Hmm.
come for me. But you
They're
know what I
each
mean?
perfect in their
Like,
own way.
it would be great. So you're on the podcast today to talk about something that you've gone through recently that has been tough, to say the least. And when you and I were talking about it together in DMs, and you were sharing your experience with the hurricanes, both Helene and Milton, you shared so much that I was like, I want the podcast audience to hear your story and also what you learned from it, because it really impacted me. And so I know it will impact other people. So let's start with Helene. What water is your home near in Florida? And what happened to houses near you during Hurricane Helene?
So we live in Tampa Bay. So we live like literally, we have the beautiful Gulf of Mexico, which provides the best sunsets, I think, and it's great. But the Tampa Bay, the way that it's designed, as perfect as it may be, it is flawed in the sense that when you get a hurricane like Helene, that storm surge, depending on which side of the storm that you're in, goes into the bay and it has nowhere to go. And that's what happened with Helene. Um, it's very interesting because I have a cleaning business, so I have clients all over. They're on the water, on the bay side, they're on the ocean side. We have people who are inland who weren't even expecting, and they got flooded. And it's something that I told myself I wouldn't get emotional today about just talking about it because I feel like actually my therapy session is on Friday, so I feel like I'm getting this out with you for the first time since dealing with it all. But
Hmm.
and yeah, it was pretty tough seeing people who didn't evacuate because they didn't need to evacuate, and their house got 3, 4, 5 inches of water, and 5 inches of water is a lot of water. And then you had people who got 3 feet of water, and that was really hard. I think nobody was expecting Helene to hit Tampa Bay the way that it did.
Yeah. I mean, because we are further west than you are, where I am in Florida. And we happen to be on the side of the hurricane. I've learned so much about hurricanes since living here, but like you want to be west of it. So you guys were east of it. So you guys got the bad wind,
Hmm.
rain situation. Did you guys evacuate for Helene? Did your family evacuate?
Yeah, we did. So where we live, there's different evacuation zones. You have evacuation A, B, C, and it goes, I think, all the way up to E. It's very interesting where I live. Right here, I'm zone B, I believe it is. Like my house is B, 3 doors down is C, a block down from me is A. So it's like, do I risk it with children? So once we got the evacuation for zone A, which is a block away, and my husband was able to evacuate with us, we were like, let's just go to Orlando. Again, it's a privilege. I recognize that so much now. I already recognized it before, but I see how much of a privilege it is to evacuate. So we did. And again, we didn't have damage. I had a few neighbors that stayed and they were texting us and saying, hey, it rained a lot, or yes, the water started creeping in, but thankfully we're good. It was about a block away, and a block south of us, a block west of us had damage, and everybody on the water. Most of my clients, I lost half of my clients with Helene because half of my clients had a foot of water, and if they don't have a house, we can't clean it. Which I don't even, to me, like, it's sad, but that wasn't even the worst of it. I felt bad for our clients who literally lost everything with Helene.
Wow.
Here in Tampa Bay, we have a meteorologist. He says you can hide from wind, but you have to run from water. And so from the wind, you can go into the center of the house in a bathroom, hide and protect yourselves. But when water's creeping in, you can't. And it's water, it's not just standing water, it's water with the force of the ocean coming in as well, with however miles per hour that storm is bringing in.
Okay, well, thank you for explaining that because, especially for people who aren't like accustomed to hurricane world, I think that there's kind of this misconception that it's the dangerous winds and all of that, which is, I mean, gosh, trees falling into homes is a real problem. And
Hmm.
that's scary, but it's this flooding that is the biggest issue. So you guys went to Orlando, you come back. And then how did you feel? Like, what were your emotions when you found out that Milton was now on its way so shortly after Helene?
I'm a weather freak. Like I just love following the weather. I tell my husband that if I wasn't doing what I'm doing today, being a mom and a business owner, I would have loved to be a meteorologist. So I follow a couple like good sources here in Tampa Bay, and they were already talking about it because they said that the setup down in the Caribbean was the same as Helene, and all the conditions were favorable, the water, the wind, all this stuff. So it was on my radar. And I mean, having a husband who's active duty, sometimes he can come with me, sometimes he can't. So I'm always looking at that because if I have to pick up and go, sometimes I'm by myself. My mom lives nearby. She can come if she's around, or I have my husband to come with us. So I'm always kind of looking. The day that Helene hit here, I already knew that Milton was a possibility. And I just remember telling my husband, like my mom wasn't even here. She was out of the country. She was out of the country for the entire month. So I said, we can't put our guard down. Like we didn't even unpack everything. We just left things kind of the way that they were because I just said, I have a feeling we're going to have to evacuate again.
Mm, gosh, that's like the worst because it's exhausting on so many levels. It's exhausting because you don't know what's going to happen. It's exhausting because just the like physicality of traveling with kids is a lot. And the planning, the mental load of figuring out what you're taking and where you're going and booking it all out and planning how long it's going to be till you get there and where you're going to get gas along the way. And what if your kid needs to pee in the middle of driving? I mean,
Your dog.
tell
And
me more
then
about that.
I think the planning for me is where I start feeling, I mean, I have anxiety, I have ADHD, so I start already if I have a plan, I'm fine. But you can't really have a plan when something is so unexpected and the you don't know which direction it's going to go. You have a cone of uncertainty with most storms. It can go anywhere in that cone, like the eye of the storms.
Okay, so you see that you need to evacuate from Milton and you now repack the car up. You figure all that out, which I'm glad you brought up that it's a privilege. I think a lot of times people will be like, oh, they're so dumb. Why didn't they evacuate? You
You
know,
need to
and
have
it's like
money to
victim blaming.
evacuate.
And I'm like,
You need to have money.
exactly. You need to have a
You need to.
car. You need to have money to spend on a hotel. You need to not have to work up until the very last second just so that you can have money to survive. Like there's so much that I feel like people forget from a place of privilege. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so you guys now hit the road for Milton. What was going through your head?
So we always have a plan. We leave in the middle of the night. If we're traveling with our kids, we put them to sleep, we pack up the car, we sleep for about 5 hours, and then we hit the road. My kids, they always know that. They know that if we're hitting the road, it's 2, 3 a.m., it's dark outside, we're going on a road trip. So that was our goal. Our goal was to get out of the major cities of where we were evacuating to because we left Tampa Bay and we are heading to the Panhandle. We knew we needed to leave the big cities before 7 a.m., before rush hour, morning rush hour traffic. So our goal was we need to get to I-10. And it feels so like end of the world when I say this because I literally kept saying this to my husband. We need to get to I-10 by 7 a.m. We need, like, it is a goal. We need to leave and we need to get there because we're going to be stuck in traffic. We don't know if there's gas. The kids are going to have to use the bathroom. They're going to want to have breakfast. I have enough snacks, but I threw away a lot of food. I didn't cook because I didn't have time. So I'm like, I just kept telling him, we need to go. We need to go. We need to go. And so we left at about 2 a.m. I will tell you, from where we are in Tampa Bay to the Panhandle to where we stayed, it normally takes us about 5.5 hours, maybe 6. It took us 12.
Oh.
and there was no gasoline half of the way up. There's an app that everybody uses, Gas Buddy, and people are saying, hey, there's gas here, there's no gas here, all this stuff on the app, constantly updating it. So if I'm driving or my husband's driving, both of us are looking at that, getting off of the highway. Okay, great, we're going to put more gas. There's no gas. We have to go back. Okay, keep going. And again, we filled up. Like, it's not like we left on empty or anything like that, but like I would just say, it's like the end of the world kind of feeling. I felt like we were escaping something. And that's every single time we have to evacuate. But with Milton, I will tell you, I did not feel the way I felt with Milton with any other storm except for Ian, to the point that we closed the door because we have to film everything, like for insurance purposes. And I'm looking at the door and I'm like, well, everything we have in our car is what's going to survive. If we come back, like, we're not going to have a house. We were mentally prepared to say that. And we did. We looked at it and we're like, we're not going to have a house. This is our house now, like our van with our kids and stuffed to the brim, that I'm pushing that door to do with what we can with what we have.
Oh my gosh, what a sinking feeling. And that's kind of the perfect segue then to this concept of minimal living and what you shared with me in DMs, that this kind of gave you new perspective. So let's stay right there. You're closing the door, you're looking at your house, and you're like, I don't think I might not see all this again. What were you thinking in that moment in terms of your attachment to your belongings?
I will take it back maybe 12 hours from that moment, because the 12 hours from that moment, I'm packing our clothes, I'm packing what we need. And I've definitely condensed with every evacuation that we've had. And I'm packing my kids' clothes, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take 7 outfits. I'm going to take 5 more summery outfits and then 2 more like wintry outfits. Add another jacket onto that. And that's what they have. Like their little packing cube situation, that's what they have. And if we get displaced, at least we can get by with a few jackets. But if we're in Florida, we're going to get a heat wave. We can survive with this, and we just keep washing and washing. That puts into perspective that we don't need all the clothes that we have. That I was able to pick 7 outfits for every single person for 5 members of my family, and that's it. And I look back in like my closet. I mean, my closet, my husband's closet is definitely more full. My kids' closet, listening to your podcast, I was able to truly like take a lot away. Um, they just have their clothes, their play clothes, and then like uniforms for school. And basically, what stayed was their uniforms, and that was basically it. But looking at my closet, I looked at it and I was like, I really don't need all this stuff. Like, what I need is in my suitcase in my car. And we started feeling like that for a lot of things. And I got to one point that me and my husband we were delirious. The kids were in bed. We put everybody to bed at like 5 p.m. that day, 5 or 6 p.m. And before we packed up the car, I just started grabbing things and throwing it in the dumpster. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't need this. This is literally, it's in my way. We're trying to leave. Our life is changing possibly tomorrow. We don't need this." I'm chucking things, and he's just looking at me. But he's going to do what I do too, because that's how we are. And he's like, "Oh, okay. What else am I grabbing?" And I'm like, "We don't need this. Throw it away." And it just put more into perspective. But the mindset was, it was in my way as I'm trying to save our family from whatever may happen. But with Helene, I saw so many people's stuff on the curbside when you have to take everything out that gets damaged, that I'm like, I don't want extra work if we have to come back and demolish our house. Like, if we have to clean up, if it floods, whatever, I don't want to deal with that. Then I'm not going to have the emotional bandwidth to do it then. And I was definitely running off of adrenaline, like 2 or 3 days without sleep. And I'm just chucking. I'm like, this bicycle, it's broken. Why am I? I'm not going to fix it. Throw it in the garbage. And he's like, maybe we can. I was like, no, just throw it in the garbage. But at one point, he's just like, Larissa, you need to like relax. Like, we can't throw everything away. But it, I mean, we could, but obviously didn't have the time. But it really put it into perspective. I have things that I don't need. I don't. And I have things that were in my way. to save my family or to, like, that's how I felt. I felt like the things were dragging me down. They were tripping, like I was tripping over things, and I'm like, I don't need this. I don't need this. Why is it even here?
Mm.
It's keeping me behind. And as I was reflecting on the way there, on the way back, I'm just like, I don't want to live like this anymore. Like, and we've been working on bringing things down. I will tell you that, Shannon. Like, we've been decluttering and removing things, especially because we have a military move next summer. So we always do that. But it just made me realize that there are so many more things that I just want to be done with. I don't want to have that dragging me down. And that's how I feel.
Yeah, what you say reminds me of there's a couple stories out there that I've heard of people who've like lost everything in a fire. And they say that the most surprising emotion that they feel afterwards is relief of like, I can start fresh. I don't have all of the stuff that it was too hard for me to get rid of. So that choice was made for me. And I'm kind of glad it was. Right. And I think you experienced that a bit on the front end of it. Obviously, like, spoiler alert, you didn't lose everything, but like, it made you think through this on such a deeper level. Like, what's in your car is all you need, especially because your kids, your dogs, and your husband are there. Like, the
Yeah.
relationships are what matters. And it's not, and I'm definitely going to ask you to share some about your background, because I think that we do need to talk about that. It's not from a place of privilege that you are readjusting your relationship with your belongings, because you very much understand that belongings can be important. And I'm not saying sentimental items don't matter, but at the end of the day, what truly does matter more than the sentimental items, more than the things we've worked hard for, is our relationships and the people around us, and then basic sense of security. And that, fortunately, with husbands in the Coast Guard, like, we know we're going to have a basic sense of security. But, speaking of those things that did actually matter, what did you pack in your van besides the clothes? Like, were there any sentimental items that you brought with you?
I literally sat. So, if you're listening to this, I guess in without the video, I have a like an organizer binder that I just sat here for maybe an hour the day that we were prepping to evacuate, and I started grabbing all of my kids' artwork from school that I liked. And I mean, this may sound silly, but I just like that's what I cared about. Of course, I grabbed our documents, I grabbed our clothes, and I grabbed a few things, but I just kept thinking, wait, my kids like, I don't know, Thanksgiving handprint. Like, I want that. I want the turkey with the handprint, you know? It was that. It was I have a tote, a container with all of my pictures from when I was a baby, my mom's pictures, my grandmother's pictures, and it literally just says family photos on it. I have not organized it. I'm not there yet with my organization skills, but everything is there. And I'm like, I need this because I want to talk to my kids. Like, this is what I want to share with my kids. I don't care about anything else in this house, you know? I want to show my kids what my life
Mm-hmm.
was as a child and this, so we brought that. Something I've learned with every uh, evacuation after having kids, all of my kids' toys fit in a clear tote, and like the toys that they care about. So they're monster trucks, couple of monster trucks, couple of Hot Wheels, um, like the Magnetiles, a roll-up track, and then a few like puzzles. And we played with that for hours in several hotels, without power, with power, traveling. And I'm like, my kids are so happy with just this clear tote that we put in our van and drive away with.
Isn't that amazing? It really, and you have three little kids, like prime toy ages, and
Hmm.
more than one of them, And it's true. It's just we overbuy because we have space in our house. Like, you have the perfect amount in a tote because there's a clear boundary there, versus in a house where, like, whatever, I can put another toy in this corner. And next thing you know, you feel really bogged down, and your kids don't even need that to be happy. And thank you for sharing those things, because I obviously have this whole podcast about decluttering, and I think people assume that less is always better, or that there are no physical possessions that should matter. And that's not true. I mean, I would do the same thing. I would go grab my kids' handprints. I'm not one of those people that uses the like archive or anything where they make a you take a picture of your kids' artwork and they make a book. I think that's a great option for people who like that. But I want the actual handprint. I want to know that their little paw touched
Goes
that
back
piece of
fast.
paper when they were 3 years old. That does a lot for me, and I appreciate you sharing that because it does put into perspective the kinds of things that we want to keep. And like you said, they're related to our memories and to our kids and to our relationships. We're not worried so much about the expensive gadgets. We're worried about the things that are irreplaceable because they represent the people that we love. And so I just think that's great. And I know that you had heard some rumors or even knew people who didn't evacuate, who did live in areas where it could get really dangerous because they were afraid to leave their possessions. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. We can always get those stories from the local Facebook groups. Some of them are entertaining and some of them are actually sad. Like people were laughing at that, but there were moments that I saw a story about a lady, she's like, I can't leave. Like the chair that's here was my dad's, and she was literally talking about the things of what she was going to protect. And someone said to her, storm surge will knock you like on your feet, like you're going to not be able to like protect that chair. And that it puts into perspective for you. And I understand we all have sentimental things. It was just hard reading that because I understood where she came from about, wow, like there is a sentimental value to that. And but then you also see the other side of people being like they couldn't leave, like they literally could not physically leave their home. This is the house that I built, or this is the house that I worked my entire life to retire in, and that's a huge thing. So
Mm.
many stories of people who said, I'm not leaving. I worked 40 years to be able to buy this house in Florida. I'm not leaving this condo. I'm not, and on one hand, you're like, wait, please evacuate. Please go to a shelter. Please be safe. And then on the other hand, I get it. Like, you worked your entire life to have a comfortable retirement, a comfortable last couple of years of life. But I think it goes back and forth in that whole thing of what's more important in our life or the things that we accumulate, the things that we buy. And it may not even be accumulated, it could be a simple home, but is that important over your life?
I appreciate that very balanced view so much because you're right. Like, we can absolutely empathize with how hard it is to leave behind a house or belongings that mean something to you on a personal level, whether it's because you worked hard for it or because of memories attached. I mean, we just talked about our kids' handprints. Like, if that's in a chair, that's a lot harder to take with you. But I think that the key piece here that concerns me is like there we have to know a limit of like when does the stuff become like truly it overtakes us in a way that's not helping our lives at all. In fact, it's endangering our lives. Like, that is so counterproductive because you won't have the memory of your dad in that chair anymore if you are dead. You know what I mean? I mean, that
100%.
sounds really harsh, but it's true. Like, you're not going to enjoy this house in retirement. Like, sitting in it isn't going to save it from a storm. And if you get hurt or you put other people at risk who are trying to come now rescue you and one of them gets hurt, is that worth it just so you can say, I stayed in the house that means a lot to me? And that is the bridge we have to cross and say, how are the things, and we can scale this down, right, Lala? Like, we can scale this down from like life or death situation to just everyday decluttering and say, what is this holding me back from that I'm so attached to it, but it's actually not helping my life. In fact, it's hurting my life, right? We can say, oh, but like, let's take something super dumb, like your water bottle collection. But I don't want to get rid of this one because it's so cute and it's pink. And I don't want to get rid of this one because, I like that it has a handle and this other one doesn't have a handle. And then you keep all these water bottles. But in reality, every single time you open your cabinet, it's stressful to try and get something out of it. Things fall out. You don't know what you own anymore. You're spending a stupid amount of money on like duplicate items. And so then you're stressed about money for somewhere else that you actually need it. How are these little things, are we letting them get in the way of like the big picture of what we want for life? And then you have the life or death stuff. Like, what am I letting get in the way of my actual life? And it's this attachment to an unhealthy and unproductive level that I think we need to be very much aware of. It's not saying everything's bad or you shouldn't appreciate your things. It's just saying don't keep so much of it, or don't be so attached to it that you lose the bigger picture of what actually matters and of how it's actually affecting your life.
It's, I'm about to tell a story, and I told myself I would never let this story come to light, but it's so relatable to this moment. When we evacuated for Adalia last year, we evacuated me, my kids, my husband in a car, and then my mom and my cousin in another car. And we're all staying in the same hotel in Orlando. And I fought my family, fought my entire family, saying I needed to bring my kids' nugget. Yes, the oversized couch, the nugget. And I'm very much like, we're gonna bring what we need, and we're gonna do, but my kids need their nugget. And my husband's looking at me and my mom, and I don't know. Like, I couldn't even blame it on, oh, it's postpartum. Like, no, my kid was 1.5 at that time. Like, there were no excuses at that point. But for me, and it's something that I shared with you, I grew up from a single mom who immigrated to the US, and we came with nothing. A nugget is something that my mom would have never been able to afford that for me. And it's something that for my three boys, who are neurodivergent and on the spectrum, it's such a like it's a fun thing, like they get to jump, and it's so much fun. And I just felt we were evacuating, and I have all these, and this was a year ago, so I had a 1.5 year old, a 2.5 year old, and a 4.5 year old, and I'm like, I need something of comfort for them, because if we lose our house, like, they need their nugget. And nobody was understanding my like craziness. But this time, how the world works is I didn't have my mom here. We were traveling with one car, and in that car I couldn't fit that nugget this time. Granted, I've kind of moved away from the nugget. I mean, I like it, but I don't have an emotional attachment to the nugget anymore. But I remember, like, my husband joked and say, "Are we bringing the nugget? What are we leaving behind? Like, what are we doing? Are we leaving behind our clothes? Because the nugget's not going to fit with the suitcase." And I just looked at him and I'm like, we're not bringing the nugget this time. And it was a joke between us, and he definitely took advantage of it and made fun of me for a little bit, but it was. And I remember that last year, like, I was freaking out because of a nugget, like a couch, a children's couch, and insurance could have covered it, or we could work for it again, but it wasn't as important as my kids and my family. And so I told myself that story would never see the light of day, but I understand where the people come from that. But I think that's where we need to work on letting go and having, like, seeing what's important and not getting so attached to things, and instead get attached to people, to memories, to experiences. I think that's more important than the nugget.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's funny, but it's also such a testament to your background and to how hard you and your mom have worked to create this life for yourself here and your husband. And that matters, right? And so we can't belittle what's important to someone, especially when we don't understand where they're coming from. I think that's really a value of mine as someone who talks about decluttering, is I will never identify something as unnecessary unless like it's a duplicate. But even then, like you have to be careful, right? Because you don't know what that item represents to someone more deeply. Like you said, your nugget represented an item that your mom never would have been able to afford. And so it shows the growth and the hard work and the quote American dream, right? In some ways. And from that perspective, can you share, I mean, you kind of just did, but can you share more about how can we respect and work hard for a life that makes us proud without getting attached to the status of stuff?
Oh my God, I'm not gonna cry when I say this, but the person who has taught me that the most is my mom, for sure. I moved to the US when I was 6 years old. My mom, single mom, we moved from Brazil to Connecticut. And I didn't understand it at the time, but I see it now. She left behind her house. She left behind everything. And we traveled. There's a picture of me landing at JFK with four suitcases, like four suitcases. And I see that and I'm like, how? How? And we moved to the US, landed in JFK, went to Connecticut, stayed with my aunt. Like, I didn't even have my own room at the time, which, again, it's the small things in life. We were starting over, we were doing a whole life. And so many times my mom would be like, be thankful for what you have. This is what we have, and we're working towards what we want. Um, there was another moment in my like childhood that again it was another lesson. We lived in a great apartment, and my mom moved us to literally a studio basement, which was across the street from my middle school. And I resented her so much for that. I'm like, we had to get rid of everything. I didn't have my room. I was so confused on what was going on. She was doing that to save up money for her down payment for her first condo, like her first house that she was ever buying in the US. And I look back at that now and I'm like, oh, she was saying that us having a home that she owned, that she worked for, so we could have our own space was a lot more important than the stuff that we had in our two-bedroom apartment. And we lived very well in that little studio basement, for a couple of months. I think it was 6 months or so. So I look at that, and then the biggest lesson I think I ever had was the recession of 2008, 2010, and my mom, like, we lost our house, and I had moved down to Florida to go to college here in Tampa Bay, and my mom stayed back to get rid of everything. And I didn't realize the emotional toll that took on her because she was losing her house to the bank, and she just started giving away furniture and all of that. When she arrived at my college, I'll never forget it. It was like April of 2011, and the car was full to the brim. And I'm like, where's the rest of the stuff? Like, I was expecting a U-Haul. And she goes, I got rid of it all. I donated it. I sold it. Everything that's in this like car is our favorite books. I brought some of your winter clothes if you want it. I brought some of my clothes, and that's it. And started over again in 2011 in Florida. And I think those moments really made me realize that yes, we didn't have a lot, or we didn't have periods of times we didn't have things, but we always worked back toward, like, we worked back to get it. And I think that's something that I need to go back and go back to that lesson a few times now in my life, but I want to pass that on to my kids, that it's not about the stuff. It's about, hey, we have to let go of our house for a little bit so we can start over and live a comfortable life 14 years later and own our own business. It puts it into perspective. If she hadn't let go of that, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is that you learned even when you didn't have a lot, and even when like the quote worst case scenario happened, when it comes to this fear and this scarcity mindset of like holding on to things because we can't, like, what if we lost it, or what if I can't afford another one in the future, or whatever it is. It sounds like instead of your mom clinging to things to either prove her worth and her hard work, because she worked hard, it sounds like, from
Yeah.
between when you were 6 to when you were in college. And she ended up at a similar place of starting over when you're 6 and starting over when you're 18. And instead of saying, I need to keep all this stuff to prove that my hard work in those years mattered, she was able to say, I know I can do it again. I know I can reacquire it. I know that these are not the things that actually matter. And that's a powerful lesson. I have goosebumps right now just thinking about it, because I think a lot of people who maybe grew up with less, they have a hard time. They hold on to stuff because of that scarcity mindset of, I know what it's like to not be able to afford to replace this, or I know what it's like to not have this thing. but what that's doing is they're holding on to things from a place of fear, versus your mother who had this freedom about her of saying, like, my life matters whether I have all the stuff or I don't. Like, it matters, and I'm good. And, like, sure, have some winter clothes, but, like, let's just figure it out again. And that, I
Yeah.
mean, that resilience. Your mom sounds like the greatest, and I'm not
Oh,
surprised because you are too. But
I mean, we're
what a
not going to
powerful
tell her that
story.
because it'll get to her head. So for sure, we're not going to tell her that. But she really is. And what you said about just not having, I still struggle with that. And I mean, I had her as an example, and she, like I said, she is my checks and balance every day because there are moments we, like, I get married, I have kids, we have our house, and I'm like, oh, I want to decorate it this way. Like, I didn't have decorations, or we didn't have this growing up. And now, with more things, like my husband and I even talked about it, the way our living room was set up a year ago, and I completely took everything out. And when I took everything out, he's like, I feel like we can breathe. And I'm like, I know. Doesn't it feel good? Our
Mm.
kids can run up and down. We're not yelling at them, be careful with this, be careful with that. And I thought I wanted the way that the living room was with that the piece of furniture that I had. But then we opened it up. We put a different couch. It just opened it up, and they had this huge living room that they could just run and have fun. And it's a bad rainy day, but we can have fun at home. And we don't need to yell, and we don't need to tell them, don't touch this, don't. And that was my like reality check of, oh, okay, so I don't need the stuff. Yes, I didn't have it, but just because I can have it, that doesn't mean I need it. And that has been something that I'm working on it, you know. It's not there, trust me. If you look at this room post hurricane, I'm like, oh, I wish I could throw away. I mean, I'm going to be getting rid of, throwing away, donating half of the stuff in here because I feel overwhelmed by it. And I don't want to feel like that. I want to feel how I feel in my living room. That is just like, you know.
Absolutely. So, okay, so to wrap up, last hurricane kind of a question is
Yeah.
just, can you tell the people what did happen with Milton? You came back home, and what was it like?
It's still bad. I mean, Milton hit what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. People's stuff are still sitting out on their curbs. Their entire homes are outside on the curbside. And there's cars that are just stopped in the middle of places because the cars got flooded and no longer work. So it's weird because the news has stopped talking about it, but our lives are not the same. I have two intersections on my street that don't have lights. The traffic lights completely blew out, and they put four stop signs, and nobody follows the stop sign. So it's chaotic. I think those are words that I would use, that life is chaotic. It's a little bit just unsettled. It feels like we're swaying with the wind. Like I don't feel grounded right now.
Hmm. And you guys, so your home was pretty much unscathed, but you just didn't have power. Is that right? For a couple days?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Not
For
just
so
didn't have power. Not having power is the worst.
yeah. Didn't have it. There wasn't any damage, but you can smell, there's like a weird smell to it. I don't know how to explain it. And I was talking to someone about it, and you start seeing more spiders, you start seeing critters. So just that feeling, we lost power, lost all of our, and it seemed it's little compared to other people. And I say that because, again, I've had clients of mine who have lost everything, furniture, things, their everything. I have a
Mm.
client who's driving a U-Haul truck because it's the only thing he can find to rent. So it's crazy.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And I think it is important that we continue to remember that just because it's not in the media anymore doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And we can take so many of the lessons that you've shared into kind of even the holiday season that's coming up and really think about what's important. I just hope that as people listen to this, they reassess their own relationship with stuff, their own privilege, their own what they can enjoy in the comforts of this holiday season, and think about people in your area of Florida or Asheville, North Carolina, or some of these other areas that have been devastated by these hurricanes, that it's going to take years before they look or seem or feel normal again, and consider what we can do for people in those areas rather than thinking about ourselves and our own stuff. Thank you, Lala, for being here. I know this was a slightly longer conversation than I had told you we would do, but you just have so much value to offer. And thank you for your vulnerability and sharing from a perspective that I know is going to be really powerful for people.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face. So thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at paring_down, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.